pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Vietnam Veterans News Podcast. News of interest about Vietnam veterans from a Vietnam veteran. Now, here's your host, Mac Payne.
This is Mac Payne here with episode 1867 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran. In this episode, I'm going to share a story with you that comes from the Redstone Rocket. I do this because Skip Vaughn writes tremendous stories about Vietnam that appear in the Redstone Rocket, up there in Huntsville, Alabama. Recently, he wrote a story about a soldier that fought at the Battle of Dak To way back in early November of 1967. This story grabbed my attention because I myself have a connection to the battle at Dak To. Thank the good Lord above I was not there, courtesy of my guardian angel that seems to follow me around everywhere. Turned out to be a very interesting series of events. When I went to Vietnam and reported in to the 4th Infantry Division up near Pleiku, specifically Camp Anari, which was a few miles south of Pleiku. We did what most people do when you go to Vietnam and sign into a division somewhere over there. Most of them would put you through a 1-week orientation course to let you know what you could expect in the upcoming year. Even though we'd spent years training for Vietnam, when we got there, they had to retrain us again to tell us how it really was going to be. I got a kick out of some of the things I heard when we got to Vietnam. The Army spent a lot of time and money training us how to fight in Vietnam. We got to Vietnam, and so many times I would hear this: "We are in Vietnam now, and this is how we do it here. Not like that." And I would always think, why didn't they teach us that back in the States, since they have their own way of doing things here in Vietnam? But as usual, nobody seems to listen to me. When I reported into the 4th Division, they had their usual 1-week orientation class. We're in this class and we're learning all these things. They let us throw some grenades. That was fun. And then one day, about the middle of the week, we were right in the middle of a very fascinating class. It seems a representative from the medical battalion there in the division was there giving a class on procedures we should be careful to follow if we engaged in what you would call personal relations with some of the females in that country. The instructor was getting down to the nitty-gritty. It was fascinating because he was explaining all the things you could run into and what could happen to you and what you could do to avoid them. Right in the middle of that class, when we're all glued to what the instructor was saying, trucks pulled up. The sergeant in charge came over, took over the class, and said, "This orientation school is hereby closed." He proceeded to go down a list of names of soldiers in that orientation class, and they were ordered to get on the truck. That was about everybody in the class. I was sitting there waiting for them to call my name. They never did. Right there in the middle of it, everybody got on the truck and they left. We had no idea where they were going or what they were going to do or what, and I felt like I was going to miss out on something very interesting. They talked about some type of a battle going on up north on the other side of Kontum. I was thinking, why didn't they take me? I have an infantry MOS. I could go up and help them. But what did they do? They assigned me over to the 4th S&T Battalion. I hated the place from the day I got there until the day I left. I hated most of the people there, except for a select few, one of which was my good best buddy, Jim Nakata. He was a good guy from California. You can tell from his name he was of Japanese descent. He had that Japanese stoic attitude about him. Like the time he went on R&R to Hawaii to meet up with his girlfriend from California. She didn't show. She stood my good buddy Jim Nakata up. He came back to Campanari, and he told me what happened. And I thought, Jim, that is terrible. He was very stoic about it. As he stared stoically out at the horizon, he calmly said, "We'll work it out later." That's the way Jim was. Jim and I had a lot of adventures over there. One time he was involved with me in the greatest Jeep wreck in the history of Vietnam. Luckily, he survived. Another time we went through a big ambush together in a Jeep on Highway 19. Turned out to be extremely funny what happened that day in that ambush. We got through that okay also. Afterwards, when I heard about why those people were taken out of the orientation class and sent up to a place called Dak To, I realized I guess it was a good thing they didn't send me up there because it was a terrible battle. Up in the mountains, they carried out one of those classical Vietnam battles. The NVA gathered up some troops in the mountains up there, and they were rough mountains. I spent some time near Dak To later in my tour at a Special Forces camp called Dak Siang, not too far from Dak To, and that is some rough country up there with those mountains. The scary thing about it is it's only a hop, skip, and a jump from the Laotian border, where it seemed like the entire North Vietnamese army was riding up and down that interstate highway known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It was a terrible battle. The 4th Division and the 173rd took some heavy casualties. Along with the NVA, they took some heavy casualties. It was a typical battle they had over there. We would go in there and fight as hard as we could, and then after the NVA did as much damage as they could and killed as many Americans because they knew they were involved in a PR war more than a military war in Vietnam. After they had done as much damage as they could, they would just sort of melt away. And then we would leave the area. Didn't make a lot of sense to me. Why would we get so many of our men killed and then we just leave the place? That's what went on at Dak To in 1967. John Kennedy, who lives in Huntsville, Alabama, is retired from the military. He was a PFC in the 173rd Airborne Brigade there at Dak To. Skip Vaughn interviewed John Kennedy and received a very good description of how it was to be fighting in the Battle of Dak To. I'm going to share that story with you so you can understand better what these Vietnam veterans went through over there in Vietnam and why they should be appreciated for their service to their country. The title of Skip Vaughn's story is Soldier Fought 5 Days for Hill in Dak To in 1967. Let's take a look at it. Dateline, Huntsville, Alabama. PFC John Kennedy had just been in Vietnam a few months when he became involved in some of the bloodiest fighting of the war, the Battle of Dak To in November of 1967. The 20-year-old draftee from New York fought on Hill 875 in Dak To in the Central Highlands. It was scary. It was 5 days of intense battle, Kennedy said. He was grazed by a bullet for the first of his 2 Purple Hearts he would receive from his 2.5 years there. Did you get that? John Kennedy spent 2.5 years in Vietnam with the 173rd. I'll bet John Kennedy proudly displays plaques with the 173rd patch on it. 173rd's a good outfit. My son was assigned to the 173rd over in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, while they were out on an operation, the vehicle he was in was blown up. Or as they say in North Carolina, it was blowed up. Through the grace of God, my son came back all in one piece, and he had all his faculties. Matter of fact, he had some extra faculties because they had to put some magnesium vertebrae in his back. They operated on him right there in Afghanistan. He came back 1 inch taller than he was when he went over. He kind of walks funny, but he's still there in one piece, thank the good Lord above. Continuing with the story. Kennedy served with the 173rd Airborne Brigade from August of 1967 through January of 1970 in the Central Highlands. Midway into his tour, he spent almost 3 months in the hospital because of his second combat wound. A booby trap sent a small piece of metal into his knee. It was like a little needle thing. Didn't hardly bleed, but it got infected, he said. Besides his 2 Purple Hearts, he received a Bronze Star and an Air Medal. Years later, he would be inducted into the Madison County Military Hall of Heroes, right there in Huntsville. The Huntsville resident described what he most remembers from his Vietnam service. He said this, "I would say dealing with the elements, insects, rain, the terrain, just dealing with that kind of stuff." In 2008, Kennedy left the Army Reserve at Redstone Arsenal after 42 years of combined continuous service. He retired from civil service in January 2003 as a configuration manager at the then Research Development and Engineering Center. He served on active duty from May 1966 to November of 1979 and left as a sergeant first class. He retired from the reserve at the garrison in 2008 as a first sergeant. Kennedy went to war again in 2004 when he deployed to Afghanistan with the 926th Combat Engineers, a reserve unit in Huntsville. But he saw the contrast from the reception he received when he returned home from Afghanistan. In January of 1970, the first thing he was told while out processing was to remove his uniform as soon as possible. He noticed the strange looks he received from other passengers when he flew into JFK Airport in New York City. "John, you didn't need to worry about those strange looks." "I know I never worried about strange looks. The only time I would ever worry about them was if they were threatening me with any kind of physical harm. If they started doing things like that, I'd go find the nearest piece of a 2x4 and change their attitude with it." Continuing. That was back in 1970 when he came home from Vietnam. He said the reception was totally different when he got back to Fort Benning, Georgia from Afghanistan. "All we wanted to do was get home, but yes, there were ceremonies. Redstone put on a welcome home," he said. "It made me feel great. It was a great feeling." The son of an Army veteran from World War II, Kennedy was born in the Bronx, New York. He graduated from DeWitt Clinton High School in 1965 and went to work at a neighborhood drugstore. He got drafted on May the 11th, 1966, and became an infantryman. During his years as a civilian at the Research Development and Engineering Center, the configuration manager worked on a variety of weapon systems. Those included the tube-launched, optically tracked, wire-guided missile, or better known as the TOW, and the multiple launch rocket system. He spent a few years as a logistic assistant representative. When he retired in 2003, he left with 36 years of service, including 13 years on active duty. Kennedy and his wife of 17 years, Vicki, have a combined 3 sons, 4 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. At 73, he enjoys playing golf. He is a member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and the Military Order of the Purple Heart. He shared his thoughts of this nation's commemoration of the 50 years since the Vietnam War. "I think it's cool that the veterans from Vietnam will be recognized in a positive way," he said. "I've always been proud that I served. I feel honored that I am a veteran." Hear, hear, John Kennedy of Huntsville, Alabama. John is another one of those tremendous representatives of the great Vietnam veteran generation, one as great as any that ever heeded the call of duty from its country. To this day, John looks good. I think he could probably still go out and serve with the guys in the 173rd. I invite you to go over to the podcast website, VietnamVeteranNews.com, episode 1867, and there you will see a picture of John Kennedy today. I think you'll agree, he looks good. John Kennedy, thank you very much for your service to your country. I hereby issue you an official Vietnam Veteran News podcast salute for your service to your country, both in Vietnam and the years afterwards. Thank you very much. I wish you and yours the best. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. This is Mac Payne closing out episode 1867 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. Thank you so much for coming to listen to these stories. You are cordially invited to return again soon and often to listen to more that will be coming your way on this podcast, the Vietnam Veteran News.
How about that? Ain't that a mess?